afternoon. Thank you. It is indeed a pleasure that I have to be among you today and have the opportunity to visit with you about energy. But first of all, let me thank Newt for convening this workshop and this day and this sort of session regarding something that's extremely important to each and every one of us. And that's how we power our cars and buses and trucks, and how we provide light and heat, how we provide the energy to create new products. My friends, you may be asking, why in the world or how does a guy that has a title being the chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission have anything to do with energy, and why is he standing in front of you in the first place? It's because the Texas Railroad Commission has nothing to do with railroads. It was created back in 1871, obviously to 1891, obviously to regulate railroads as they were being built across the state, and us Texans, being who we are, were concerned about what we call those Yankees moving those railroads across the state and jacking up our rates. And so we created the Railroad Commission of Texas to sort of manage all of that. And when they started producing crude back in early 1900, and you'd put crude oil in a barrel and then put it on a rail and move it across the state, they gave that jurisdiction to the Railroad Commission. Later, when we started producing natural gas, they said, well, since you got jurisdiction over crude oil, you might as well have jurisdiction over natural gas, and we got that. But 4 years ago, we went to the legislature. We said, you know, the 800 some odd employees we have, only 14 of them have anything to do with railroads. And that's railroad safety. If there's a crossing guard, there's an electronic warning device. Why don't you move that to the state's transportation agency? And said, oh, by the way, there's some associated energy activities elsewhere in state government. Why don't you move that to the Railroad Commission? And if you do that, why not change our name to something like the Texas Energy Commission? And the legislature moved the 14 employees to the Texas Department of Transportation. They moved one of those associated activities to us, and they refused to change the name. And so today, while we have absolutely nothing to do with railroads, we are still called the Railroad Commission of Texas. But my friends, I do think there is a reason for me to be here. Obviously, we're the #1 producer of crude oil in the country, the #1 producer of natural gas in the country, the #5 producer of coal. We're the largest consumer of energy in the country. And I'd like to share with you what I think has sort of been the Texas way. And in terms of the getting to energy security. And we make certain assumptions. We make an assumption I think that you probably make as well, that we have an obligation, a moral obligation, to take care of the environment that God gave to us. We also believe that we can have a healthy environment and a healthy economy at the same time. My friends, we also believe that we can get to energy security and get to that healthy economy by creating pro-growth energy solutions and pro-growth environmental solutions. But the way we do that, quite frankly, is to rely, as Newt has said on a number of occasions, we rely upon the entrepreneurial spirit of innovators, rely upon incentives, rely upon innovation, rather than litigation and taxation and regulation. And you will hear during the balance of my comments that we believe getting the energy security, I think getting America the energy security, is about balance and diversity. Just as we would have in our investment portfolios, we would have balance and we would have diversity. That's how we're going to get there in terms of energy security. Now, I'm just simply going to talk mostly today about electricity, and Newt is going to talk to you about transportation. You know, when you think about the way we use energy in this country, you use it for 4 basic purposes. Either to generate electricity, either to move our cars, trucks, and buses and tractors, or for heat, or to make things through chemical feedstocks. And I'm just going to talk about electricity. Because all too often when we think about energy, we get caught up in this thought about crude oil and gasoline, forgetting that 60% of our national GDP comes from firms that are powered by electricity, not by gasoline and diesel. If you look at the growth in our economy going back to 1980, a significant portion of that comes from companies and firms that are fueled by electricity. not by crude oil. So I want to talk about electricity because obviously how we go about the business of generating affordable, clean, reliable electricity is extremely important for us being able to make sure that we have economic growth, which allows us to have prosperity. And I think in doing that, there are a couple of things that fuel sources we have to look to. We have to look to the workhorse in the energy business. And the workhorse in the energy business is natural gas. We use natural gas, obviously, to make power, natural gas to generate heat. Natural gas is a chemical feedstock in order to make plastics and ammonia and fertilizer, things of that nature. And as you know, there's a Texan back home that's talking about using a little bit more natural gas to move our cars and trucks. You know, next week I'm going to have the occasion to take around our state a propane-powered school bus, the first one to come off of the factory line in about 15 years, because I've been trying to encourage school districts to move from diesel and gasoline-powered school buses to propane because it's cheaper and cleaner. And every time we fill up that propane school bus, that's one less barrel of crude we had to buy from some foreign dictator that doesn't like us. And a couple of weeks later, we're going to take around a natural gas school bus because we don't want the natural gas people feeling left out for the same reasons, for the exact same reasons, because it's ours. And as we look at natural gas, it's extremely important for us to recognize that we have abundant supplies of natural gas here in America. And we should be drilling for America's resources right here in America. We've got 230 some odd trillion cubic feet onshore, 420 plus trillion cubic feet of natural gas offshore. But you know, you think about it, federal law now only allows us to drill about 15% of our available reserves that are offshore. And you think that is gas that we're going to just leave there because somebody has decided that we should not go get our stuff. I know there's probably a more intellectual way I could have said that, but our stuff sounds right to me. But we should be drilling ours. And you think about, you know, Chesapeake Energy, which is the largest natural gas producer in our state and one of the largest in the country, will tell us that we've got a 100-year supply in terms of reserves of natural gas in this country. Right now, if you go through the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you'll see something called the Barnett Shale. It's the largest natural gas play in North America. We're dropping holes everywhere. At Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, there's going to be 500 some odd natural gas wells just so we can get America's resources. But in addition to natural gas, we've got to use some other resources. And quite frankly, one of them is we got to bring back the utilization of nuclear power in this country. I don't mean any harm. If the Japanese are generating 30% of their power from nuclear power, and if the French are generating 71% of their power, if the French can figure it out, surely we can. I mean, my friends, we need, you know, nuclear power today satisfies about 20% of our needs. But in order for us to keep even at that 20% level, with the amount of demand that we're going to have for demand for electricity between now and 2030, we're going to need at least a minimum of 35 new nuclear plants. In order for us to get to 35 nuclear plants, we've got to do a couple things. And the change that we're going to have to require is we have to streamline the permitting process so that we can get those plants online faster. We're going to have to accelerate research and development of the Generation 4 International Forum, which would be a new nuclear facility that would provide greater safety and lower costs, that would also have a much, much more efficient waste disposal system and operations. And we're going to have to encourage states like ours and yours, as well as the federal government, to encourage research and development for the safe disposal and reuse of nuclear waste. One of the things that we're doing back in our state is encouraging or asking our legislature, when they come in January 2009 to provide the opportunity for our universities, particularly Texas A&M University, which has been leading in this area, to continue research and expand their research in terms of how we can recycle that spent fuel. So we reduce the necessity to dispose of it, because every time you can recycle it, you use it over and over until it is in a de minimis fashion. But providing power. Why nuclear power? Because it's cheap. It is the cheapest in terms of levelized cost. It is the cheapest way to make power that we know of. And there are no emissions. And for people who are concerned about CO2 emissions, there are none. As a matter of fact, if we had the same percentage of nuclear power in our inventory today as the French do, we'd be able to not only meet what were those Kyoto Protocol standards, but we'd be able to exceed them. In addition to natural gas and nuclear power, something else has to be part of that mix, and it's got to be coal. As you heard earlier, we in the U.S., we are the Saudi Arabia of coal. We've got a 200 to 250 year supply of coal at today's consumption levels. And I know when I mention coal, some people get concerned, because you think about sulfur dioxide and mercury and particulate matter and CO2 and all that black stuff that goes up in the air. I'm partial to black stuff. So I'm not particularly worried about that, but I understand that they are. And that's why the federal government was involved in and developed a project several years ago called FutureGen. It was a project to design the first near zero emissions power plant in the world using coal. And it asked us as states that are coal producing and coal using states to identify places within our state where you might, in addition to building a power plant that would use coal, that you could do something else, that you could take the CO2 that's emitted and capture that CO2 and to permanently store that CO2 beneath the surface. States around the country participated in that project. We did. We came in second. Illinois won. But the reason that we were excited about it is because you think about, we emit about 770 million tons of CO2 every year. You capture that CO2 and permanently store it. Don't have to worry about it. And in addition to that, there was another reason that all of us should be excited about a project where you could capture CO2, store some of it, but another piece of it, use it for enhanced oil recovery. In Texas, for the last 35 years, we've been using CO2 and injecting it into old and aging oil fields to produce more crude oil. As a matter of fact, we produce almost 1 million barrels of crude every day, and about 20% of it comes from CO2 EOR. As the old men like to say, you know, CO2 in an old aging oil field is almost like putting that oil field on Viagra. But it works. And as you look across the country, there's literally the opportunity for billions more production of CO2 EOR opportunities in America. But what we got to do is obviously encourage more experimentation. Unfortunately, that FutureGen project was canceled by the federal government, so we need to renegotiate with Illinois and turn it back on. In addition to that, it would be helpful to create FutureGen-like opportunities in states like Texas and elsewhere, so we can put a carbon capture and storage technology on the back end of a power plant or the back end of a refinery, so we can learn more about how to do this. You know, the last thing that, you know, we can do is we got to sort of look at wind. You know, we've got a lot of wind in West Texas. And right now, believe it or not, Texas is the #1 producer of wind-generated power in the country. About 5,000 plus megawatts of installed wind. The opportunity of about 10,000 megawatts of installed wind power by the end of 2009. About 30,000 plus megawatts of wind-generated power that could come online, and it's in one phase of planning right now. But you know, it's interesting, God had a sense of humor. For us, he put the wind in West Texas, and he put the demand, the load, in Dallas-Fort Worth. He just wanted to see if we could figure out a way to get that wind to Dallas-Fort Worth and Houston-Galveston. And so just like what would happen with the opportunity we have in this country through the middle of the country to build giant wind farms, to provide cheap, renewable power to Americans, we're going to have to obviously become innovators in being able to transmit and to move that power. The second challenge that God gave us is that for us, our onshore wind blows very heavy in the early part of the day and the early part of the evening, but not when there's high demand load in the middle of the day, when all of us are at work and at school. But we can obviously, there are innovators who think they're about that close from the finish line of being able to develop above ground storage for wind and below ground storage of off-peak wind power. We should be incentivizing and encouraging those opportunities so that we can deal with the issues and the questions of the intermittency of wind. My friends, we have a wide range of opportunities for us in terms of advancing what we're doing and to be able to generate affordable and clean and reliable power. We just have to get with it. As my friends back home know, there's a story I love to tell, and with all these folks here, and they've given me some additional time, I think I'll tell it. There's a story listed about somebody that we've all read about. There's a story about a man named Moses. Moses and his people out there in the desert, right? They knew as hard as they ran, as fast as they went, they couldn't get away because right smack in front of them was the Red Sea. But Moses said, I've got this cane. It's a magical cane. I've prayed about it, I got a special word about it. I know if I put the cane over the water will open up. When the water opens up, we'll walk through it. When we get on the other side, I put the cane back over the water will close up, and Pharaoh and his men will be on the backside, we'll get away. Moses knew it would work. Studied the idea, prayed over it, got a special word about it. But he did something we do in government a lot. He formed a committee. Now, on the committee was a lawyer, an engineer, and a doctor. And he went to the lawyer and said, Mr. Lawyer, what do you think about my idea? The lawyer said, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Your whole water up in there like this is going to roll downstream, going to flood the people at the end. We don't own the water rights, we'll sue us. Don't try it. So he goes to the engineer and asks the engineer what he thought about the idea. And I've been married to an engineer for 23 years, and I know the engineer said this first part. I have never agreed with a lawyer on anything. Your idea defies the laws of gravity. It won't work. So he goes to the doctor and asks the doctor, he says, what do you think about my idea? And the doctor says, look, we've been out here a long time. Got sores on the bottom of my feet. We get to the other side. Even if we do, germs will have gotten up in us and we'll die. Don't try it. It won't work. But Moses knew it would work. But in the back room, he asked the young lady what she thought of his idea. And she said, I'm not a lawyer. I know nothing about prosecuting a lawsuit. I'm not an engineer. I know nothing about the laws of gravity. I'm not a doctor. I know absolutely nothing about the prevention of illness. But if you can pull this off, I get you 3 whole pages in the Bible. My friends, let me tell you something. The work we have in front of us to get this country to the stage where we have secured energy security will not get us 3 pages in the Bible. But it will make for better Texas and Georgia, Maryland and Vermont and Virginia, and a better America. And as we're going down that road, let's remember a couple things that were in that story. Number one, remember that there is a plan, and there's a grand plan as we move down it. Remember, number two, that it's going to take us some courage, just as those men and women there had to exercise some courage, recognizing that on all sides of them was a whole bunch of water, and sure had to be a little scary to step your foot off on that dry land with that water around you. So it'll take us some courage to do the kinds of things we need to. And third, let's remember what's in our hand. And in our hand, we have natural gas. And in our hand, we have coal. And in our hand, we've got nuclear power. In our hand, we've got wind and sun. And my friends, if we take advantage of what's in our hand, we can secure America's energy future. May the peace of the Lord be with you. May God bless you. May God bless America. Thank you.